I used to think good and evil were just ideas, concepts, constructs. The old war stories we wrapped ourselves in when the world felt too chaotic to understand. Good was kindness. Evil was cruelty. Simple, manageable, human. And like most people who believe they're thinking clearly, I believed that evil was mostly noise, isolated cruelties, occasional tragedies, things explainable by psychology, by economics, by broken childhoods and bad luck. The world wasn't full of monsters, I told myself. It was full of broken people making broken choices. It was easier to believe that. Cleaner, safer. I could look at the headlines and cluck my tongue and tell myself that given the right circumstances, all of it would heal itself. Goodness, I thought, was a natural state, a default. Evil was just the absence of goodness, like cold is the absence of heat. A flaw in the system, not a force in its own right. I don't believe that anymore. I can't. Not after reading the pages that follow. Not after holding the weight of a voice that never should have been allowed to speak. Reading the careful, hateful confessions of a creature who spent centuries carving souls away from the light. Good and evil are not abstractions. They are not metaphors. They are real. More real than stone and breath and time. Goodness isn't the absence of evil. Goodness is an active force. A relentless, burning presence that evil recoils from but can never destroy. And evil? Evil is not simply the lack of goodness. It is a will, a hunger, a deliberate sentient rot that fights to unmake what it cannot create, to corrupt what it cannot truly claim. The battle between them is not fought on the grand stages of history alone. It's not only waged between armies or presidents or kings. It's fought in kitchens and bedrooms and classrooms and offices, in the quiet chambers of ordinary human hearts. It's fought in the choice to forgive when bitterness feels more righteous, in the choice to confess when pride would rather dig deeper, in the choice to hope when cynicism feels safer. Evil is patient. It does not need us to be monstrous. It only needs us to be tired, distracted, afraid. It only needs us to forget that we are not alone. Because once we believe the lie that we are alone, that no one sees us, that no one cares, that no one will answer when we cry out, the walls start to crumble. And evil has all the time in the world to slip through the cracks. I didn't believe any of this. Not truly. Not until I found the journal. Not until I read, page after page, the slow and deliberate campaigns waged against souls who thought they were simply living their lives. Until I realized how much of the world's sorrow, how much of its anger, how much of its despair was not just human frailty, but the fingerprints of something darker, something laughing behind the curtain. And yet, this is not a story of despair. If it were, I would have burned the journal the moment I realized what it was. I would have destroyed it, buried it, sealed it in concrete and salt. But I didn't. Because even in these pages, even in the rotted voice of one who delighted in destruction, there is a deeper truth. Grace is stronger. Always. Because every whisper of pride, every scheme of cruelty, every slow, careful attempt to pull a soul into the pit was answered. Maybe not with trumpets, maybe not with flashing swords and fire from the sky, but answered all the same. Answered in quiet prayers and whispered in broken bedrooms. Answered in hymns hummed through cracked lips. Answered in stubborn acts of mercy and unseen acts of faithfulness. Grace does not roar. It does not demand. It endures. It endures when evil exhausts itself screaming. It endures when demons rage themselves into dust. It endures when the darkness promises it will have the final word. And the final word is always, inevitably, mercy. What you are about to listen to is not a pleasant record. It is not comfortable. It is not sterile. It is a confession, a testament of what evil has tried and what it has failed to achieve. It is a reminder that even the strongest malice collapses under the silent weight of grace. I transcribed it not to glorify the darkness, but to testify to the light that endured beyond it. Listen carefully, not because there is power in the pages themselves. There isn't. The power lies in remembering what they forgot. That no matter how long the night howls, the morning always comes. That no matter how fiercely evil rages, it cannot endure the weight of silence stronger than screams. That no matter how many battles are lost, the war was won before it ever began. You are not alone. You were never alone. Even here, even now. Especially now. Signed, Oliver. There's a theory, half philosophy, half faith, that no person is wholly good or wholly evil, that we are made of warring instincts, that light and shadow run down the center of every human heart. I've always believed that. Still do, I think. But what we don't like to admit is how easily that line shifts. It doesn't take much. A disappointment, a silence, a private bitterness left to fester. One day you wake up and realize you've moved a few degrees off true north. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to call it a bad day. A season, a phase. And if you're not paying attention, that phase becomes the person you are. The devil doesn't knock on your front door. He doesn't have to. You leave it open for him when you're tired, distracted, or convinced you're fine. I wasn't looking for anything in particular when I found it. Just browsing. It was a Saturday, late spring. One of those neighborhood yard sales where time collapses and everything smells faintly of mildew. An old woman with soft hands told me her father had died the month before. Said he'd kept things no one had touched in decades. Books, letters, antiques. Some of it was junk. Some of it wasn't. The drawer caught my eye. Heavy oak. Carved faces on the handles. It looked old enough to remember war. I didn't even really need it, but something about it felt right. That I needed to have it. like it had secrets and it wanted me to ask. When I got it home, I found the false bottom almost immediately. A thin sheet of wood came loose with a knife. Beneath it, a journal, leather-bound, cold to the touch. Inside, I found page after page of careful, articulate, deeply troubling prose. The handwriting was elegant, not quite human. The journal belonged to something called Scrierix. He calls himself a demon. I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean that these pages, however they came to be, contain the personal writings of something that claims to be in the employ of hell itself. A soul tempter, a bureaucrat in the infernal machine. The tone is difficult to explain. Part memoir, part performance review. He writes like a man balancing self-loathing with smugness. He brags about the people he's ruined, complains about his workload, mocks heaven and mocks us. I spent the last 3 months reading it, and now I'm transcribing it. Not for fame, not for validation, certainly not for entertainment. I wrote my thoughts in my own journal after finding this thing. I'll leave you with my thoughts at the end of each entry. Entry 1. Scrierix's Journal. Unit 6B, Sin Allocation Department, Emotional Instability Division. It's easy to think of hell as chaos, screaming fire, endless torment, and sure, that's one version. But you want to know what real damnation looks like? Filing a 32-page audit to explain why the last soul you pushed into madness got snatched back at the 11th hour by some praying grandmother and a hospice chaplain. That's hell. We don't ask permission to tempt. That's human thinking. We act. We prod, we whisper. We place the bait. But after the fact, that's when the paperwork begins. Everything has to be tracked, justified, categorized, cross-referenced in triplicate, so we don't attract unnecessary attention from upstairs. We're allowed to twist the world. We're just not allowed to break the balance. I'm currently 5 reports behind, 3 audits overdue, and being investigated by oversight for excessive influence during peak prayer intervals. Whatever that means. The rules are elastic, until they aren't. And still somehow I have to turn numbers. And they don't say it, but they want quotas. Souls claimed, hearts bent, consciences dulled, preferably without the flare. Big flashy disasters, those get noticed. What they want now is the slow ruin, the quiet collapses. Men and women who fall apart at the seams while smiling in the mirror. I've worked here a long time. Not long by immortal standards, but long enough to know the politics here are as nasty as the job. Everyone's under pressure. Everyone's trying to claw up the ranks, or at least make sure someone else gets audited first. Veltrix from Sector C slept his way into a promotion. Now he oversees Despair Subdivision 3, even though he can't even corrupt a youth pastor with access to TikTok. Another demon, Krath, sabotaged my backlog last month. Deleted half my case history just to take credit for a suicide I spent weeks cultivating. It's not just sabotage. It's territorial. I specialize in emotional volatility. Rage, shame, inferiority. I study it. I sculpt it. But now, The lust department's trying to poach cross-send clients. They're pushing for more integrated cases. As if making a man cheat and spiral into depression is some kind of innovation. They forget. Rage is purer. It doesn't hide. It doesn't pretend to be pleasure. It just burns. Which brings me to my current subject. Gregory Finch, a middle manager, 42. Wife left him last year. Took the dog, the house, the better friends. What did he get? 2 new medications, a weekly therapy session he lies through, and a red stapler he hides in his desk so nobody else touches it. Ooh, he's seething. Quietly. All day. He thinks he's holding it together. He's not. I started small. Misdirected a few emails, glitched the elevator on his floor. Then came the whispers. They think you're weak. They're setting you up. You're the punchline at lunch. He started overcompensating. Showing up early, passive-aggressively offering to help others with their jobs, then watching their faces when they politely declined. Classic displacement. Easy to twist. I watched him rehearse a confrontation in the bathroom mirror. It was pathetic. Inspiring, really. 2 days ago, I bumped his internet connection during a remote meeting. Just enough to lag to make him talk over his manager. His eyes twitched. He laughed too loud to cover it. Nobody laughed with him. Today I pushed a little harder. A new hire spilled coffee on his desk. Gregory snapped, visibly. Voice raised, veins bulged. HR made a note. His boss asked him to take a walk. I whispered, "They're documenting you. They want you out. You are an expendable, angry, middle-aged liability." He sat in his car after work for 37 minutes. No music. Just that tight silence before a man punches his steering wheel and pretends it was about traffic. Tomorrow's the tipping point. If I've done this right, he'll interrupt someone in a meeting, or slam a door too loud. He'll do something small but final. Something that HR can use to justify what they've already decided. All I have to do now is keep the tension in his gut wound tight. He thinks he's in control. That's the best part. Humans always think they're steering the ship, even as they drill holes in the hull. My job is not to shove him over the edge. That's crude. My job is to make the edge look like solid ground. Of course, I'll have to submit a behavioral breakdown after the fact, cross-reference sin categories, tag relevant departments for long-term torment processing. You think they'd be grateful for quality damnation work. But no. I'll file my report, I'll get flagged for tone. They'll say I'm too hands-on, and Veltrix will find some way to slip his name into my file and take credit for the man's eventual breakdown. That's hell. And I'm still here. Signed, Scrierix. Demon Class 4, Department of Emotional Instability, Division 6B. Currently pending internal review. Again. Here's my first response to entry 1. I don't know if I should be more disturbed by the content of this journal, or by how easy it is to follow. At first, I thought this was just a twisted piece of fiction, some niche creative writing exercise. But there's something too exact in the way this Scrierix speaks. Too organized. I expected fire and brimstone. This reads more like internal memos from a failing corporation run by sociopaths, which I guess is exactly what it's describing. There's a tone here that feels almost human. Not in the moral sense. This thing is clearly not human in heart, but in behavior. The pettiness, the status obsession, the office rivalries, the spreadsheets. It mimics us. Or maybe we mimic it. I don't like how real Gregory feels. I don't know the man. He might not even exist. But I know men like him. I prayed with them, coached them, sat across from them in their church halls as they smiled and politely said, "I'm doing all right, thanks," when their hands were shaking and their marriages were on fire. And here's this demon, this Scrierix, not tempting them with drugs or sex or violence, but with doubt, with silence, with just enough disruption to let a man spiral on his own. That's the most terrifying part of this entry. The demon doesn't create the fall. He just loosens the screws and lets gravity do the rest. It's surgical. Gregory Finch didn't explode. He eroded. And that makes me wonder, how many times have I mistaken erosion for endurance? I keep thinking of that line. My job is to make the edge look like solid ground. If that doesn't scare you, you're not paying attention. I don't know who you are, Scrierix. I don't know if you're real or if someone like you wrote this as a warning or a trap. But I'm reading now, and I'll keep reading. Signed, Oliver. Entry 2. Unit 6B, Emotional Instability Division. If there's one thing worse than the paperwork, it's the quotas. You'd think, being literal manifestations of evil, we'd be immune to things like productivity metrics and quarterly evaluations. But no. Hell is addicted to numbers. Souls lost, moral collapses finalized. Number of stumbles successfully weaponized into spirals. It all gets logged, tracked, compared, compensated, or punished. My performance file currently has 1 red flag and 2 under scrutiny tags. I've been summoned for quota review twice this cycle. You ever sat in a room of ancient, scowling supervisors while their projector cycles through PowerPoint slides of your failures, each marked with a little animated flame and sarcastic applause sound effects? My last review included this gem in my evaluation. Scrierix demonstrates an excess of flair and a deficiency in closures. Recommend tighter follow-through and fewer existential monologues. Yeah, well, tighten this, Vorgath. They love to talk about team synergy right before they assign us to the cold room shifts. That's where they send the ones who miss their marks. Rooms that mimic the last 5 minutes of a soul slipping away from us. You just sit there, watch it in loop, knowing you failed to lock it down. I did 3 rotations in Cold Room 19 after that missionary in Calcutta started forgiving everyone who wronged her, even the man who assaulted her. Smiling, weeping, forgiving. It was disgusting. Beautiful, maybe, but mostly disgusting. So now I stay sharp. I keep files, I take notes. And sometimes, when things are particularly bleak and the politics too irritating, I remind myself of my best work. Let me tell you about a few of my favorites. Here's the husband who stopped listening. It began with small things. A grunt instead of a response. A delayed uh-huh when his wife talked. Not because he didn't love her. He still did. He prayed for her at night. They met at Bible college. Wore matching t-shirts on their honeymoon. Shared devotional time. But the years dulled the edge. She started correcting his stories when he told them. Small, factual details. It was a Thursday, not a Friday. He laughed it off at first. I added a whisper. She always has to have the last word. He was tired from work. Overloaded. Their kids were in 2 different schools. Bills stacking, no time for intimacy. So I kept nudging. She doesn't admire you anymore. She sees your limits. She's bored. One night, she was late from a parent-teacher conference. He didn't text, didn't call. When she walked in and said, "Sorry, they ran late," I helped his silence stretch into resentment. The next day, he came home and didn't speak at all. Within 2 months, their prayer time dried up. Their dinner conversations turned into logistics. By month 6, he was staying later at work. Not for the money, but to talk to Natalie in accounting. Natalie who laughed at his dumb jokes. Natalie who listened. He didn't cheat. He never touched her. But he stopped praying. That was the real break. He told himself, I'll get back to it once things settle down. They didn't. She filed for divorce 2 years later. Said she felt spiritually abandoned. He still insists he never did anything wrong. And you know what? He didn't. He just didn't do anything at all. And that was the art. Ooh, how about this? The pastor who loved the applause. He was 27 when he took over the church. The old pastor retired, left behind a sleepy, aging congregation. This kid brought light shows, acoustic covers, branded sermon series. This new pastor was electric and preached like he was on fire. Talked about God like he'd just spoken to him that morning. People came in droves. Youth groups exploded, Instagram clips went viral. And I was patient. I didn't try to ruin him. Not right away. I just echoed the applause. Every time someone said, "You're the reason I came back to church," I whispered, "You're the reason." He stopped citing scripture as often and he started quoting himself. He started watching the playback of his sermons, not to improve, but to relive the crowd's reaction. Then came the book deal. He prayed over it, said he wanted to expand the message. But what he really wanted was the stage. The branding agency, the 6-figure advance. I made sure the endorsements came from the right people. Big names, thin theology, wide smiles. He started adjusting his doctrine to keep them. He thought he was doing good. Still prayed, still preached. But by then, the word had hollowed him out. He was selling God as a lifestyle. He'd built an empire and called it ministry. And when it all crashed, when the affair leaked, the financial mismanagement hit the press, he wept. not for his soul, but for his brand. How about this one? The mother who meant well. She had 3 kids and a worn Bible. The leather was cracked from years of use. She prayed every morning at 5 a.m. before anyone else was awake. She loved God deeply, and she loved her children more than her own life. And that's exactly where I started. She wanted them safe. Safe from bad theology. Safe from worldly influence. Safe from heartbreak. I just made her afraid. Of everything. I used headlines, statistics, Christian Facebook groups full of half-baked conspiracies. When her daughter asked questions about faith, she panicked. Doubt, she thought, was the first step toward rebellion. I twisted her prayers into panic attacks. Every time one of her children failed, even in small ways, I whispered, "You're losing them. You didn't pray hard enough. You failed." She started forcing them to church events, removed every secular book from the house, took away phones, shut down friendships, called it protecting them. Her oldest left for college and never came back. The middle one stopped speaking to her after she found his hidden journal and burned it. The youngest told a friend, "I feel like I'm in prison." She died thinking she was a warrior for God. Well, years later, her children still flinch when someone says the word faith. I didn't need to make her evil. Just afraid. How about another? I call this one the philosopher who laughed. There's a certain breed of human I particularly enjoy working on. The kind that believes their intelligence is insulation. That because they can explain a thing, they're immune to it. Philosophy professors, specifically. They're delightful. This one, Dr. Nathaniel Lorne, was brilliant. Tenured at 34. Regular guest on debate panels. He'd written 3 books by the time he started teaching full-time. One of them, Faith as Folly, The Tyranny of Belief, sold over 100,000 copies and was quoted in 2 Supreme Court briefs. He was a man of order, a man of precision, a man who believed emotion was just a residue of the animal self. And he loved the sound of his own voice. I didn't need to give him anything new. I just amplified what was already there. Every time a student asked a sincere question about morality, I planted the same thought. They're only asking because they don't understand the question. The real win wasn't turning him atheist. He was already there. The win was turning him inward, making him worship his own conclusions, making him laugh at the idea that he could ever be wrong. I remember one lecture in particular. He was discussing the illusion of objective morality. A freshman raised her hand and asked timidly, "But if there's no higher standard, how do we know something is wrong?" He smiled, not kindly. He said, "We don't. We just agree on what we're willing to punish. And sometimes not even that." The class laughed, nervously, except the girl. She left after that semester, went home. Her church tried to encourage her, but the seed of doubt had been planted. I passed that case to another tempter. Team effort. Back to Nathaniel. In private, he was less arrogant. In the quiet, he had questions. He'd watch the news, see a child killed or a scandal erupt, and feel something twist in him. But then I'd remind him, there's no standard. You taught that. You proved it. Don't be sentimental now." And he nodded to himself, alone in his kitchen. Years passed. His marriage dissolved. Mutual incompatibility. His books grew thinner and more circular. His lectures more cynical. He stopped mentoring, stopped publishing. Eventually, he retired early. Said he was tired of performing philosophy for the ignorant. He lives alone now. Doesn't speak to his daughter. He says it's because she's regressed into dogma. She just wanted him to come to her baptism. His body is alive. His soul entombed in his own intellect. He doesn't laugh as much anymore, but he still thinks he's won. And that is why I have. Now here's another. The girl who measured her worth. Her name was Alina. 17, church kid, youth group leader. Played keys during worship. Soft-spoken, big heart, bigger eyes. The kind that looked like they were always hoping to be seen. She was raised right. Bibles at breakfast. Family prayers before bed. Her parents loved her, but they didn't understand her. Not really. They told her she was beautiful. But the world told her what beautiful meant, and she didn't see that in the mirror. I didn't come to her in fire. I came to her in filters. A little jealousy here, a little envy there. Social media was a buffet. Every girl thinner, prettier, bolder. Every boy chasing them and not her. I just whispered the same thing every time she scrolled. You'll never be enough until you are more. More makeup, more smiles, more exposure. Just a little more skin. After all, they were doing it and they got noticed. So she posted. Not all at once. Slowly. A new profile pic, a gym selfie, a photo in that dress she never wore to youth group. The likes came in, the comments followed. It felt good. Briefly. She started measuring her value by attention, then by comparison, then by guilt. And then came the double life. Church Alina prayed, apologized, rededicated. Online Alina curated, performed, craved. She felt torn, split, lukewarm, she called it. She tried to quit. Social media, the friends, the pressure. But she couldn't. Because I had convinced her that the false version of her was the only one people ever truly saw. The real her. That awkward girl in sweats, eyes tired from studying scripture, fingers shaking during late-night prayer. I made sure she believed no one could love that version. Eventually the guilt drowned her. She stopped coming to youth group and told herself she needed time to figure things out. Her Bible stayed on the nightstand unopened. And that's where I left her. Not burning, not raving, just numb. A shell of someone who once believed she was fearfully and wonderfully made. Scrierix, closing monologue, entry 2. There's an elegance to quiet ruin. The world expects damnation to arrive in thunderclaps. Affairs, murders, public shame, the full collapse. But those are just fireworks for amateurs. My art is slow. My method is patience. I don't force the fall. I cultivate it. I water the cracks in the foundation until the house collapses under the weight of its own silence. These 5, they were beautiful. Not because they were spectacular, but because they were common. Everyday humans, churchgoers, thinkers, parents, lovers, and people who cried during worship songs and smiled at strangers. And all I had to do was let them keep doing what they were already doing. Just slightly more. A little more pride, a little more fear, a little more self. I've learned something working this job. Most humans don't need to be dragged into hell. They just need to be left alone long enough to forget what heaven sounded like. They need a little nudge towards the mirror. A little encouragement to compare, to control, to cling. And once they do, once they start defining themselves by anything other than grace, they'll do the rest for me. They'll build their own chains. And here's the tragic comedy of it all. They'll call it freedom. They'll scream about choice, about self-expression, about finding their truth. As if those things will hold them when they're hollowed out and the silence comes knocking. Do you know how many of them still pray after they've lost the plot? Almost all of them. They don't stop believing. They just start believing wrong. They think God's disappointed in them, ashamed, gone. And so they retreat thinking they're being judged, when really they're just judging themselves on my behalf. I don't have to lock the door. They do it for me. They think I win with sin when I win with distance. And when they finally fall, when the marriage ends or the platform crumbles or the soul simply quiets into a life of muted, self-sufficient despair, no one notices. No one pays attention. There's no explosion, no headline. Just another light going out. And I sit back. I file my report. I get no recognition, no promotion, no parade. Just another case closed. And that, I suppose, is the real reward. Because for all their preaching and pleading and hymns and hallelujahs, they never really believed someone like me could be so quiet. Signed, Scrierix, Demon Class 4, still underappreciated. Oliver here. Reading this felt like staring at a predator through a pane of glass. You're safe, technically, but you still flinch when it moves. These stories, I want to say they're exaggerated, I want to say they're fiction, but they're too precise, too ordinary. It's the ordinariness that unsettles me. There's no fire and brimstone in Scrierix's methods, no spinning heads or blood rituals. Just tired marriages, inflated egos, and silence where there should have been love. He doesn't break people, he lets them break themselves, one small compromise at a time. And I see it now. What he's actually proud of. Not the fall, but the forgetting. When the people he tempts forget who they are, who God is, and how they're held. That's the real work. But I also see something else. He underestimates us. He mocks our habits, our prayers, our fragility. And sure, we are fragile. I've lived long enough to know that. But he talks about grace like it's weak. Like it's a trick or a loophole. And that's where he's wrong. Grace doesn't excuse the fall, it interrupts it. It doesn't make sin irrelevant, it makes redemption possible. These people he corrupted, they weren't evil, they were tired, distracted and wounded, and yes, he played his part. But so much of this, so much, could have been interrupted by a single moment of humility. He calls our faith lukewarm. He says we build our own chains and call it freedom. But if that's true, then I'll gladly wear the chain that leads me back to truth. He watches from the dark and laughs when we stumble. But he forgets we aren't alone in the dark. God sees us too. And God never laughs when we rise. Signed, Oliver. Entry 3. Unit 6B, Emotional Instability Division, Scrierix. Failure isn't the end here. You might think if a tempter loses a soul, they'd be demoted. Shredded, cast out. Not so. No, the real punishment is being made to watch. When a soul you cultivated and nursed toward despair, whispered to night after night, somehow staggers to their feet, dusts themselves off, and limps back toward the interferences camp, you don't get reassigned. You get tethered. You get to watch them climb out of the pit you built for them. You get to witness every weak, stuttering prayer, every trembling act of mercy, every stupid, beautiful, reckless act of hope they dared to commit after you ruined them. That's one of hell's versions of discipline. The records call it observational reassignment. I call it agony. One soul in particular still haunts me. Not because he was extraordinary. Quite the opposite. He was painfully, laughably small. Unremarkable in every way that mattered. His name was Michael Archer. Mid-50s, widow, accountant, balding and quiet. The sort of man no one would notice standing in a checkout line. Perfect, I thought. Soft clay. His wife died on a Thursday. Complications from a surgery that wasn't supposed to be risky. One minute she was teasing him about his shirt wrinkles. The next minute he was staring at a nurse who couldn't meet his eyes. Oh, it was so easy at first. The shock, the anger, the loneliness that gnawed at the edges of his mind like rats behind a wall. I didn't even have to speak. Just sat beside him as he lay awake at night, blinking at the ceiling, and let the silence sharpen. He stopped praying within a week, stopped going to church by the end of the month. He still moved, mechanically. Went to work, paid the bills, fed the cat. But he wasn't there anymore. Just an echo in a human body. I was already drafting my victory report. Already imagining the subtle, spiraling death of faith that would complete the job without ever having to make him do anything. Just be nothing. But then came the night. It was raining. The sort of heavy, endless rain that feels like the world's trying to drown itself. Michael was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a photograph of his wife. The cat was mewling by the back door. He didn't even move, just sat there. And then the stupid man opened his mouth and said 5 words I'll never forget. I miss you. Help me. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't a prayer recited from a hymnal. It wasn't even addressed properly. No dear Lord, no formal plea. Just a broken man saying something into the empty air. And the worst part? Someone heard him. I felt it. A ripple, a presence so clean and so sharp it burned. Not loud, not triumphant. Just there, quiet and unmovable. Michael wept. Not the angry, bitter tears I had been cultivating. These were different. Surrendering tears, surrendering without bargaining and without demands. He didn't ask for an explanation, he didn't demand justice, he just opened. And all of my carefully built walls, the lattice of grief and isolation I had constructed around his soul, cracked. The next morning, he dug his wife's Bible out of a donation box he had packed weeks earlier. He didn't read it well, didn't quote it, didn't understand half of it. But he held it. And somehow holding it was enough. It wasn't dramatic. There were no choirs or visions. Just a man remembering and fumbling towards hope. He started small. A word of thanks for a sunrise, a whispered blessing over his meals, a smile for a coworker who had been quietly mourning a divorce, a donation to a neighbor who lost his job. Each act was a nail in the coffin of my campaign, and I had to watch every one. I filed the loss report naturally, mandatory. 3 days of processing, endless recalibrations of failure metrics, a full audit of my technique. They determined I had shown excessive overconfidence and despair reinforcement without allowing sufficient space for humility to germinate. Can you believe that? Punished for underestimating grace. As if grace were a rule-bound substance that obeyed pattern recognition like any other sin vector. It isn't. It's chaos. The one force we can't fully predict or contain. It doesn't follow the logic of fear or anger or lust or pride. It doesn't require conditions to be optimal. It doesn't even need permission. It just erupts. One crack in the armor, one whisper in the dark, and all our work burns like dry paper. I hate it. I hate the unpredictability of it. The waste of careful planning. Most of all, I hate that it feels beautiful even when I watch it destroy everything I built. He lived another 15 years, alone mostly, quietly. But he didn't die empty, he died mid-prayer. Talking not to the photograph of his wife, but to the interference himself. Without bitterness and without fear. I wasn't allowed to interfere. Just to watch. And now, when I close my eyes, when the bureaucratic buzz of hell goes quiet for a moment, I still hear him. A whisper, a crack in the dark, and the whole edifice of damnation trembled. Disgusting. And yet I wonder how many more like him I've missed. Signed, Scrierix. Demon Class 4, Emotional Instability Division. Probationary status. P.S. Oh, and by the way, I kind of lied when I said there wasn't punishment and torture. Once all the paperwork was filed, loss report triple stamped, audit notes returned, and my failure properly logged for eternity, I was treated to a more traditional punishment. Hell does love its little ironies. They locked me in a sensory chamber and looped the sound of Michael's last prayer. His real final one. The one just before his body gave out. It wasn't even dramatic. Just a few shaky words. Thank you. I'm ready now. These words played on repeat in his voice, whispered and sincere. For 300 hours. While I was chained to a desk made entirely of lost wedding rings and baby shoes from dead infants. Clever, isn't it? Every time I tried to tune it out, they lowered the volume just slightly, so I had to strain to hear it. So I had to choose to hear it. And I always did. That's the worst part. Curiosity is a curse we wear better than pride. So yes, observational reassignment is painful. But true torment is being forced to remember why we lost. And worst of all, why they were worth the fight in the first place. Barbed genius, really. Signed, Scrierix. Oliver here. This one made me sit up straighter. Not in fear, but in something closer to reverence. It wasn't just the story, though Michael's story is the kind that quietly crushes you in the best way. It was how Scrierix told it, how much it clearly cost him to write it. He tried to bury the pain under sarcasm and office gossip, but the truth leaked through. He lost, and it mattered. That's the part he doesn't want to admit. That's the part I don't think he fully understands. He spent weeks, months maybe, eroding that man's spirit brick by careful brick. And all it took him to undo it was a few words. That's not strategy, that's not eloquence or doctrine or theological accuracy. That's relationship. Raw, unfiltered, and real. The kind of prayer that doesn't care if it sounds holy because it's too busy being honest. And God heard it. The ripple Scrierix described, that presence that burned, it wasn't flashy. It didn't arrive with a sword or a sermon. Just presence. And Scrierix, for all his venom and bitterness, couldn't stop it. Couldn't compete with it. That gives me hope. More than hope, actually. It gives me clarity. The interference he talks about, my God, doesn't need grand gestures. He doesn't wait for perfect people. He meets the broken where they are and whispers back, I'm here. I've gotcha. Signed, Oliver. Entry 4, Scrierix's Journal, Unit 6B, Emotional Instability Division. They imagine us with whips and chains, don't they? Mortals, I mean. When they think of hell, they picture the shrieking pits, the lakes of fire, the endless wailing of the damned under an iron sky. They think we all stand over the suffering, grinning, brandishing our instruments of torture. And they're not entirely wrong. Those places exist. The bleeding circles, the maw trenches, the womb of echoes, the weeping and gnashing of teeth. Real enough. There are still demons whose entire existence is dedicated to the artistry of physical and spiritual agony. They take pride in it. They build new torments like symphonies, always trying to outdo the last cycle's innovations. I used to be one of them. A long time ago. Oh, I served in the pit once. Fresh, ambitious, soaked in the screams of newly fallen souls. I learned to carve regret into a living memory. I could fashion a man's worst moment into a blade and make him wear it against his heart for eternity. But not anymore. I haven't touched a flailing soul in... I couldn't tell you how long. Time here is elastic, shifting, days stretch into decades or collapse into seconds. There's no sun to measure by, only the churn of quotas, failures, and endless reassignment. Now, I sit at a desk. I process cases. I managed the slow rot instead of the brutal collapse. Welcome to the other hell. Welcome to the offices. Endless miles of scorched black tile. Ceilings stitched from the shredded banners of fallen kingdoms. Cubicles formed from broken vows cracked like dry bones. Fluorescent lights overhead, always just a little too bright, always flickering at the edge of insanity. The buzzing never stops. Not loud enough to drown out thought, just sharp enough to make thinking hurt. We have departments, thousands of them, each specializing in a particular method of unraveling humanity. There's the Department of Emotional Instability, my post, responsible for subtle mood manipulations, resentment cultivation, and relational decay. There's manufactured doubts, crafting insecurity about faith, about worth, about purpose. Oh, social influence manipulation sector. They operate on a grander scale, steering culture itself, trends, ideologies, the slow corrosion of collective virtue into aesthetic branding. Oh, think that ice challenge thing, where people want to donate to charity, but to get out of it, they just douse themselves in a bucket of ice water and then just pass it on to the next without ever actually donating. You seeing the trend here? Oh, and let's not forget about aesthetic degradation, a personal favorite to laugh at. They specialize in the slow numbing of beauty, the dulling of music, the cheapening of art, the commodification of the soul's natural longing for transcendence. Oh, the symphonies they've destroyed in favor of jingles. Each department has its divisions, subdivisions, special task forces, and naturally, its quota enforcement units. Performance metrics are how we live and die. Every temptation planted must be documented. Case file number, target demographics, age, culture, spiritual background, sin vectors used, primary and secondary, time to yield or rejection, degree of internal damage inflicted. There are thresholds. Threshold 1, minor setback, mood alteration, surface level sins. Threshold 2, behavioral spiral, persistent vices, broken relationships. Threshold 3, full ruin, loss of faith, taking one's life, apostasy, despair. Move a soul to threshold 2 without escalation, commendation. Move them to threshold 3 without raising flags from the interference, promotional material. Screw up enough and cause a mass intervention from above? Yikes. Review, demotion, cold room duty, or worse, reassignment to the silent wards, where tempters are stripped of their voice and sentenced to watch the prayers of those they failed to destroy forever out of reach? We are not free. We are ranked, graded, and audited. We do not build, we do not create, we do not love, we compete. And every demon here knows that your rival would rather see you crushed under the weight of failed cases and lose an ounce of status themselves. Friendship in hell is measured in who kills you last. Which brings me to where I am now, hunched in my peeling leather chair, finalizing reports on souls I nearly lost, while Veltrix, sniveling parasitic Veltrix, plants sabotage in my records and slides closer to his next promotion. Hell isn't the pit. Hell is the office. Hell is every petty ambition you thought you could control, blooming in endless, gnawing, self-devouring eternity. And the worst part? No one's making us do it. We chose this. And every day we choose it again. You don't survive here by being good at your job. You survive by being worse to your peers than they are to you. Oh, I used to think otherwise. Back when I was fresh from the trenches, all ambition and sharp edges, I believed if I just worked harder, if I just delivered cleaner collapses, more efficient ruin, the promotions board would notice. Maybe I'd even get back to a frontline torment position. A real one, and not this endless parade of broken marriages and festering pride. Idiot. Skill doesn't matter here, numbers do, appearances do. Loyalty? Loyalty is a myth told to new hires before we drown them in memos and shove them into cubicles stitched from mortal despair. And it only took Veltrix to teach me that lesson properly. He's not smarter than me, not more ruthless, just more political. Knows how to coat his sabotage in enough deniability to avoid audit flags. Take the last case. A beautiful soul, ripe for ruin, Caleb Durand. 32, junior partner at a firm no one respects but everyone fears. Self-made, sharp-dressed, baptized in the gospel of ambition. He had all the right ingredients. Pride thick as tar, envy so subtle he mistook it for motivation, and a festering resentment of anyone luckier or happier than him. I've been working on him for months. I started small, whispering during board meetings, stoking the quiet rage every time someone else got credit. Planted the idea that he was overlooked, that he deserved more. Fed the fantasies of cutting corners, of stepping over colleagues he called friends after 2 beers. It was poetry. He was on the brink. A promotion within reach. A betrayal ready to bloom. Oh, I could almost taste the Threshold 3 report. I was already sketching out the phrasing. Client successfully escalated from resentment to betrayal, leading to career collapse, marital implosion, and significant spiritual disengagement. Promotion bait if I've ever seen it. Then Veltrix got involved. Did he swoop in with a dramatic temptation? No. No flash, no noise. He spammed Caleb's personal inbox with accident emails. Bible verses about patience, stories about forgiveness, clumsy, obvious morality tales. On the surface, nothing damning, no audit flags, just noise. Enough to nudge Caleb's mind off the track I'd been laying for months. Enough to force a crack of self-awareness where there should have been pure blind momentum. Caleb hesitated, started praying again. One night, drunk and confused, on the edge of making a career-ending betrayal, he pulled back, resigned from the firm instead, cried about it to his wife, asked forgiveness from colleagues he had planned to backstab. And just like that, my work unraveled. I had to file a failure reflection form. 3 rotations of paperwork, 8 mandatory counseling sessions with the Professional Remediation Bureau, the one staffed by demons who couldn't even successfully tempt minor celebrities. Oh, and Veltrix. He logged a team assist credit for preventing an escalation event. He spun my sabotage into his success. No one cared. No one intervened. No one even asked. Because here, poaching isn't a scandal, it's a strategy. If you're not the one sabotaging someone else's climb, you're the one being sabotaged. And after that, I stopped playing by the old rules. I started planting false leads, falsifying case updates, reassigning lower priority human cases to rivals under my name to make them miss critical review deadlines? Sometimes, when I'm feeling particularly generous, I'll feed them bad intel. Hint that a soul is more susceptible to gluttony when really, it's poised to collapse through vanity. There's no point crying about it anymore. The offices don't reward loyalty, they reward survival. I don't trust any of them. Not Veltrix, not Craven from Discontent Subdivision, not Drith from Manufactured Doubts, not even Ruloth, who once covered a clerical error for me, only because he thought I'd owe him a favor later. Trust is currency here, and it's always counterfeit. The truth? Hell's hatred of humanity is nothing compared to the hatred we have for each other. Mortals think we're unified in evil, some great conspiracy of darkness. We're not. We're sharks in a pit, gnawing each other down to the bone, thinking if we just eat fast enough, maybe we won't be the next carcass. Maybe that's why the interference bothers us so much. It loves, it unifies, it redeems. We can't even comprehend it anymore. And so we hate it. And because we hate everything that even smells like it. Signed, Scrierix. Hey everyone. Oliver here. I think I'm done transcribing for now. There's more. Much more. It was hard enough to get through this the first time I read it, let alone upload it all word by word myself. I'll get more to you later. Until then, stay safe. Don't listen to the whispers. And keep faith. It gets worse.